In this video, we're going to do a behind the scenes look at my What is Evaluation paper and talk about the process from start to finish of how I came from idea all the way to a finalized published paper. So I'm going to show a timeline and walk you through it and give you some behind the scenes look at various outputs of the process. But I want to just start off and note that this is an 8-year process from start to finish, that from conceptualization to idea to starting to actually work on the manuscript to final publication was 8 years in length. This all started in fall of 2013 when I began my career at Claremont Graduate University, getting a master's degree in positive developmental psychology with this concentration in evaluation. And I didn't really know what I was getting myself into, but day one, literally actually day zero, is these professional development workshops ahead of time. I realized that, evaluation was exactly what I wanted to do, but I didn't know how to name. So I was really excited, all in, really thrilled to be in this program and to learn about evaluation. And so day one, first semester of the master's program, we're taking this Foundations of Evaluation course. One of the topics we learn about is differences between evaluation and research. And it didn't really click with me. I was still trying to figure out what is the difference, what are the distinctions. I kind of knew what a research was going into all of this, but I still wasn't clear, what is the difference between these two? And so I keep learning, I keep progressing through my degree program. 2 years later, continue on to get my PhD in evaluation and applied research methods. I've been taking a lot of evaluation courses, continue to take more evaluation and statistics and research methods courses, and I'm getting a lot of experience in the field. But I'm still pondering that question, what is the difference between the two? And a couple of years later, I finally write a blog post, Evaluation is Not Applied Research. My most popular blog post to date. It gets a lot of views, a lot of discussion, a lot of people talking about it. I was really thrilled about that. And so I kept noodling on the question, what is the difference? Obviously, I'm taking a stance here that evaluation is not applied research, but I really wanted to do some research on this because to date, most of the stuff, and actually I think I'm still one of the few researchers who have done an empirical study on this. A lot more has been done on more prescriptive looks on this. I can only think of maybe one other or a couple other studies that have done this empirically. But so I really wanted to do a research study on this. I love research on evaluation, so I really wanted to do something in this area. And so shortly after that, I began working on the research. I get my IRB approval, I collect my data, I began writing up the manuscript for publication. I didn't post it here, but I will make sure it's linked in the show notes below for this YouTube video. But one thing I did throughout this process, because I was really into the open science movement, is I made sure my IRB and my consent form allowed me to share my data publicly. So I actually have the example of the consent form and publicly available data on the Open Science Framework. So you can see all of my materials, my data, and everything else that goes along with this paper, including a preprint of the paper as well. So check out the links below and you can see more depth of all of this information. The other cool thing that I was doing at the time is I was really into R at this time, and I learned that you could write a manuscript in R. And so I actually wrote this entire manuscript in R. So here's a look behind the scenes of what this looks like in R. This is the title page information, kind of the background, what in R we call the YAML, yet another markup language. I don't know why it's called that, but this is the stuff at the very beginning of the paper, title, abstract, author information, all that stuff. This is an R Markdown file, and what that turns into is this. When I export it into a PDF, it turns it into APA format for me. So this is what it looks like. You'll note there's some slight differences. This is the preprint from when I was still at Claremont, and the screenshots I give are the most recent version of the manuscript. So slight nuance differences, but you get the gist here, right? So this is the title page, abstract page. We can go on down the R Markdown file. Again, this is all available on the Open Science Framework, so you are more than welcome to look at all of this. You'll see that I have the text of the manuscript in black In pink, you'll see the citations themselves. So there is a many capacities for R to build in your citations automatically. I use Zotero, that helps a lot. And in gray, you'll see there's some code, and that creates the first table. So all of this translates into this. Here's the text. You see the APA style 6th edition. I should be very clear. Citations, everything's in APA style, good to go. You have the table at the very end, and very cool, right? Like, I did this all in R. So I nerded out over that process. I really enjoyed it. That was using the Papajaw package called Preparing APA Journal Articles in R. Highly recommend it. A lot of fun to do that. And it made the review process and revision process really straightforward, which was also really cool. So going back to our timeline, I wrote up the manuscript for publication about a year later after starting data collection, IRB, all that stuff. About a year later, I submitted for publication in September 2019. I submitted to the American Journal of Evaluation. And so here is the cover letter that I submitted with my paper. I like to show some of that behind the scenes stuff in terms of why I argued that this was a good journal, why this was a good paper to submit to that journal, and so on. You'll see also some information about, like, I've never submitted it elsewhere. It's not already under review anywhere else. I approve. I agree to the submission policies, no conflict of interest, and so on. Oh, and IRB information. So feel free to pause, use any of this language as you see fit for your cover letters. So I submitted in September. In November, I got a decision back, which was nice and quick, actually. Really, really grateful for that. And a month later, I submitted my revisions. So I'm going to walk you through how I went through that revision process. So I receive all of the decisions from the editors and the reviewers, and I take all of those comments and I put them into a reviewer matrix. I learned how to do this from one of my advisors, Tariq Azam. I've seen this from a lot of other, and as somebody who's now an associate editor at the American Journal of Evaluation, this is really helpful. Or as somebody who is a reviewer sometimes, this is really helpful to see, were my comments addressed adequately in the paper? And so as an editor, as a reviewer, I can look at each comment and their reply, and then check in the manuscript. Did they do it? And this is really great. I actually even have my students do this in, like, their big papers and stuff of, like, what were my comments? What was my reply? What was your reply? And did you actually make that change? And it makes it so that I am less likely to introduce new comments to the process, because if I don't recall what my previous review was, then I might think of new things I hadn't thought of previously. So walking through this this matrix, you'll see I have a column for the number. It just helps me sort things, because usually people present the comments in either order of importance or order of appearance in the manuscript. I have who said it, which reviewer. So if I knew I was reviewer 1, I could focus on what my comments were, but also compare to other reviewers. This is the copy-paste verbatim comment from the editor or reviewer. And the reply, what I replied back to the reviewer or editor as a result of their comment. So this was me back end. I would write all this down, I'd reply, and then I'd go make that change and make that change in the manuscript. Here is the revision to my cover letter back to the editor and managing editor. Again, you can pause and use any of that language as you see fit. And attached to that letter and sent also to the reviewers was my reviewer comments. So I have a nice cleaned up version of what I had done in my Excel. The Excel was kind of more for me internally. This is part of my cover letter that is sent to reviewers and editors. So I resubmitted on December 2019. I received a revise and resubmit in early March, and you'll see that it was basically just go get some proofreading done. So it was essentially a conditional acceptance. And that was, once I did the proofreading, it was accepted in March of 2020, and proofs were given in April. And so here's the cover letter back. And so the main issue was the paper needed proofreading. I sent to a copy editor. This is the first time using a copy editor, and I have taken every single one of my papers subsequently to a copy editor. I found this such an incredibly useful process. They caught so many things that I hadn't seen previously because I was just so too into the weeds of my paper to really see those edits. And so highly recommend finding a copy editor, like somebody who legitimately does that for a living. They found a lot of information. I was also really happy because despite saying like, oh, you need proofreading, all this stuff, that the editor actually had very minor comments to say throughout. And they said that throughout the whole thing that it was well written and nearly immaculate and straightforward and clear and so on and so on. So I was really pleased with the process, but I have received other papers that I thought were in good shape, and they made lots of really critically helpful feedback. So submit this. I got my proofs in. The paper went online in October, and then it was published the following March. So that is the timeline for my What is Evaluation paper. I welcome any comments or questions that you have. Just add them below to the video.